Welcome to Crazed Performance Repair. Today we are going over another active fuel management engine situation. You can see I have it in pieces. You're about to find out why, but it's not what you would think, and it's not necessarily the active fuel management that caused the failure in this vehicle. Stay tuned. So not only is it an iron block motor, but on top of being an iron block motor, right now it's running because I'm waiting for it to happen. This is a intermittent potential collapse lifter scenario. So the customer complaint is actually that it comes and goes, this loud lifter knock, and he's trying to isolate it. Now he's had the system turned off, the AFM DOD system, turned off for 3 years, he says. And let's go ahead and figure out what's wrong with this thing and let it run, and hopefully it happens on camera for us. There it is. Now for what side it's on. It started ticking, and it was kind of almost sudden, but it wasn't just like that. So I noticed it started to tick really lightly at first, and then it kind of really rapidly, out of the blue, ramped up to being louder. So it kind of did a, well, you see the video, hopefully you can hear it, but it did a tick, 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 tick kind of a thing. So it wasn't totally sudden, but it was pretty close to sudden, and it's continuing to get louder as I let it sit here. Now I use my stethoscope, and I can hear that it's clearly on the driver's side here, and it almost sounds central to rear. Now if it is central, the two on this side in the middle, so that'd be cylinder 3 and 5 are non-DOD cylinders, and the number 7 is a DOD cylinder. Now this may actually not be related to AFM or displacement on demand. So I'm going to go ahead and probably pull the valve cover here, and we're going to take a look. I think I know what it might be, and if I'm right, that would be a good thing because it's a fairly easy fix. So let's go ahead and get this valve cover off and take a look at it, what's inside. Okay, so you can see I'm down to a pretty deep area right here. I mean, kind of, not really. It's pretty easy to get to. So all you have to do is you have to take these bolts off. There is 6 of these guys, or no, 5 of these guys. 5 of those bolts, which hold this on, and disconnect this connector, of course. And then once that's out of the way, you can take the 4 bolts that hold the valve cover on, pop the valve cover off, take all the rocker bolts off, and then there's a bar that sits underneath there. You can pull the whole rocker assembly. Now, why did I go this far? So let's go ahead first, before I explain that, and pull these push rods out. We're going to go ahead and do them one at a time here and keep them in order. And there's a reason I'm keeping them in order, not just the size, because the size is the same on this particular engine. So here's all the push rods. Now, the only reason I pulled these out is I'm looking for damage on them. Now, the damage that'll be there is galling. That's what it's called, and it's basically the metal chews itself away. I gotta get this in a better position. They're leaking all over the place otherwise. Okay, and we're gonna take a look and see if I could find any. There are none. So this one's actually in good shape. You can see that all these ball ends are nice and glazed and shiny. That's a good thing. That's what we want to see as far as good condition engine. So now it doesn't matter what position I put these in. We don't have to worry about it because none of them are damaged, especially on that. And I know this end's not going to be damaged. This is the actual lifter end. This end is never damaged anyway, and it is not. So I have no concern about that. And I probably should have checked it first just in case there's some weird circumstance that I need to be prepared for. So now that we know that those are okay, I can go ahead and put those back in. They're really hot though. But if you find one of these that's damaged, you're going to end up needing not only the push rod but the rocker arm. And that is a pretty common problem with these, that that will happen where the push rod tip wears out in the rocker arm. Just replace it. It's dirt cheap. I mean, the rocker arms are like $13 or something. Push rods are really cheap as well, $2 roughly per push rod, and that's kind of going on the high side. But nice, cheap, easy repair if that's the issue. This is not the issue with this particular vehicle, but it is a new issue for me, so let's go ahead and keep digging and see what I can find. Alright, so the next tactic I am taking, there is a baffle here that's supposed to trap the oil, but it's not going to work. I started earlier. I was going to grab the camera after I started it and bring you guys over, but it splashed oil everywhere. So this thing sprays oil like crazy out of for sure one of the rear ones, and I think one of the front ones. And if it's spraying oil like crazy, that's typically a sign of a worn out lifter, internally worn out. So what I'm going to do, since it's sprayed so bad, is I'm going to have somebody start the vehicle for me. And this is a cool feature that pretty much all phones have today, these newer smartphones, and it's the slow motion video. This is actually going to help me diagnose this vehicle. I'm going to use it so that I can isolate which one is making all the noise very quickly, because I don't have time with that spraying oil everywhere for me to sit there and listen with a stethoscope right now. Otherwise, I'm going to get soaked. So I'm going to go ahead and start recording this here, and then I'm going to try and make sure I get all the lifters in the screen. That way I can be sure that I get this thing figured out. And then I got to keep my hand clear of the microphone so it can pick up audio really well. And then of course I got to keep my hands clear of the belts as well. So I'm going to start recording. I'm pretty sure I see the lifter with the issue, and there is a lifter with an issue. That is crazy. Alright, so I will show you guys the slow-mo footage here right now. So after reviewing that slow-mo footage myself, I'm a little baffled, a little intrigued. I don't know the word to use, but basically the very three back lifters. You saw the slow-mo, but watch those three back lifters again during this little section here, and actually basically the three back ones. There's the two right before the very last one. Those are the two we're watching. Now when they go up and down, as you can see, they go at the same exact time dang near. I mean, one is just barely below the other, and that's exactly when the sound hits, once it slows down. Now at first when I was watching this video, I noticed that the sound, because the slow-mo is not quite as slow when the vehicle's revved up, when it first fired up, it was going a lot faster, and it almost looked like it was the very front one, and I'm like, well, that doesn't correlate with where I heard the sound, because I heard the sound central rear, like I had said. And then as the engine idled back down, the noise was definitely matching up with those two rockers. Now, that makes me go, obviously there's a lifter problem there. But at the same time, watch this rear one here, and you can see that one is just spraying oil like crazy, and then as soon as I shut it off, it sprays oil out like crazy. So it is bleeding down severely. So what is happening right now when it's doing that? Well, let's go ahead and go back to my little lifter thing that I have here. So we have two different style of lifters in this motor. Now those three rear cylinders the very rear one, or three rear cylinders, 3 rear rockers are connected to both types of lifters. So the 2 furthest rear ones are connected to this style of lifter. The front one, or the one before them 2, is on this style lifter. So this is a DOD AFM lifter, non-DOD AFM lifter. Now what's happening is this little plunger here is the hydraulic system for making sure that the valve always has pressure applied to it and it doesn't have a loose area. So it's the self-adjusting thing for when metals wear out, things like that. And the bore inside here, or this piece that rides inside the bore inside here, it is worn out to the point of where it's plunging far too easy. It's leaking oil by, pushing oil through, or there's typically a form of a valve system. There we go. There's a check ball in this thing, and the check ball has probably failed. So what I think is happening is this thing is plunging down, it's pushing oil past the check ball, through the push rod, and onto the rocker area. So it's very, very well oiled up on the top of the motor, at least in the back. Now this causes several issues. One, it's going to cause oil to get consumed by the engine. And the reason it's going to consume oil, because here is the PCV valve for that engine. This is in the furthest back corner of the engine, and you can see this little oil hole here. This is actually supposed to be a drain hole, but if it's spraying a ton of oil over here, and you can actually see evidence of this, I'll explain that in a second, but if it's spraying a ton of oil in here, it's splashing everywhere, it's going to end up in this hole and eventually go up this tube and get sucked into the motor. So the evidence I'm talking about is, if you look here, I didn't even look at this earlier, but you see these are relatively dirty. These are kind of dirty. This one's clean. This one's clean because it's getting pressure washed by that rocker splashing against it. So this is getting cleaned off because one of the lifters has failed that way. That's not the one making the noise, which is the weird part. You would expect the one making noise to be the one that's causing the oiling issue. So we have a couple scenarios going on. I'm going to have to explain this to the customer. It's unfortunate. I think he's going to have the head pulled off. And because of a DOD failure, he tried to prevent and was successful in preventing the usual failure. So this is important because all these systems, no matter how hard you try and prevent an issue, you could always have another issue. So he prevented the lifter from collapsing. It's not collapsing. It's still working, but it's failed anyway, just because. And that's something that you got to consider when it comes to these vehicles. No matter if you fix a fuel pump, the starter can go out the day later, or while you're fixing the fuel pump, for all I care. I've had cars where I pulled them in to do a tire, I pulled them out and the timing belt breaks because the guy never did his maintenance. So do as much maintenance as you can. That helps, but it doesn't prevent everything. I guess that's the moral of the story here. And I'm going to go ahead, contact this customer, give him the down low of what's going on. We'll probably end up doing the Blom model while we're there, but it's not going to solve that issue. The only thing that'll solve that is replacing the lifters. Hopefully, I don't take this apart and find a cam lobe that's chewed up because there's a roller starting to fail. That's also something that happens to these motors. Alright, so I got the truck all taken apart, and you guys just saw the before I took it apart video, obviously after the intro, and the intro was this shirt, so I'm wearing a different shirt than I was earlier. What I found, or am going to find, is going to be interesting because, as you guys see, it's some kind of lifter concern, but it's not a collapsed AFM lifter or DOD lifter. So we're going to go ahead and start looking into these lifters. Now, I left everything in its original arrangement. It's just out of the motor now, obviously. A couple small things I noticed. One is this guy here. Let's see. I don't know how well this camera can pick it up. Oh, yeah, it can pick it up. You see the weird lines in there? So, like, even right here. It's very unique. I've never seen that before in a lifter. And that to me almost looks like a machining process thing. Now, this was one of the 2 lifters that were going at the same time, making the noise. And so maybe, just maybe, that has something to do with something. Maybe there's a little more oil blowing out the sides of this thing, leaking out, because the machining had some chatter in the grindstone or whatever they used to finish cut this thing. I'd imagine it's a grindstone. Maybe it was chattering a little bit during the process, and thus it has crummier tolerances in the lifter bore. It felt tight coming out, but obviously there's spots that are tighter and looser than other spots. So maybe the oil is seeping by here, so it's got less pressure in this little area to activate this hydraulic side. So what my hypothetical theory here is that this one is noisy because there's a little bit of oil pressure leaking through here. It's already a very restrictive hole here. So if we lose even a little bit of pressure, which is very possible because I can see those lines going right across this area. So if we even lose a little bit of pressure going into there, and then we get into here, and this loses pressure to the bore inside here, which is right here, then you have the small hole there. So if this has got a little bit of slop, which it does, and it's losing pressure along the outside of this and throwing it to the outside, then we're dropping pressure there. Then we get into the center of here, and this guy, which sits with this little hat and that little bleed thing, and then this thing has like a convex kind of a popped out deal sticking in on there, and it sits like that, and then that plate pushes against it. Now, I'm not sure why it's oriented the way it is. Perhaps there's an explanation online somewhere for why it does that. But there's a check ball on the end of here, and I might try and pull this apart on camera. I've never pulled one of those out. So it fills oil in here, pushes oil this direction, and then it's not supposed to allow it to go back. If it allows it to go back, I would imagine it would squirt through the push rod, and that is where this one has failed. So I'm willing to bet you that if I blow this way on this one, which I'm gonna have to grab a hose or something, but if I blow that way on this one, it's probably gonna come out this side because it's not sealing properly. Okay, so I got it pushed on there nice and good. We're going to grab this guy, and we're going to give it a light hit with some air. Oh, it definitely holds pressure. Yeah, I got nothing leaking out of there. So, being it holds pressure, that's interesting. There we go, got it back. Now, out of curiosity, let's go this direction and see what happens. See if it responds like the other one. Yep, it responds just like the other one. So, under this cap, there's apparently a spring with a ball or some kind of tip inside of there. Oh yeah, it's a little ball. Okay, I'm going to take a look. I'm going to see if this ball maybe has a imperfection or something somewhere. It's pretty darn good. It's got a nice seat too. Well, there you have it. That's what's in there, I guess. I never took that apart on the other video of mine. So what could be causing this situation? If you have any ideas, leave a comment in the description. I honestly don't know why it's doing what it's doing, but I know the lifters are the thing that play the role in everything. And I know this one has some crazy grind marks on it. So the only thing I can assume is something has to do with the way this thing is wearing in there. It just has to be. That one maybe is the one making the noise because it can't hold enough pressure or allow enough oil to fill it up fast enough to push the push rod against. So maybe what's happening is the lobe comes up, the push rod, so the push rod is obviously all this stuff's in there. The lobe comes up, and as it pushes the spring of the valve, which is a very heavy spring, it sinks into the lifter a little bit. Obviously not that much, but you know what I mean. It sinks in there a little bit. It comes down to the bottom, gets a little bit of slop because it doesn't fill up and push this bag up fast enough. And then when it does come back up, it has a little slap and goes funk and slaps and makes that noise, the ticking noise. That's my guess as what's happening to perhaps this one. This has to be the noisy one. Now, why in the world this one was spraying so much oil past it is the part that I still do not know, and I'm not sure I'll ever know. But perhaps you guys can suggest a position for me to look in as to why this one is not holding oil. It is blowing so much oil past it. Perhaps my removing it and taking it apart knocked a piece of debris out of it. I don't know. I honestly don't know what happened to this thing. I really do want to look at this ball a little closer, because if there's a flat spot in it or something, Yeah, I don't see anything. There's just, I don't know. I'm not going to put it under a microscope. I've wasted enough time. Leave your comment in the description below. Like, share, subscribe, and as always, I hope to see you in another video. This one's interesting. I don't know where I'm going to go with it, other than I'm just going to do the full delete and see what happens. I just can't prove why it fixes it, which is going to drive me crazy. Because I am one of those people who, I want to know why. I got to know the why. The why it does what it does. Why it failed the way it did. Why? Just why? So, I'm going to be thinking about this one. And I'm probably going to lose a little sleep over it. I definitely need a little bit more sleep. But I'm probably going to lose sleep over this one. Until I have it running and know that this took care of the issue, it's going to drive me crazy. It's going to drive me absolutely mad. I'm going to be looking at some cam bearings. Even though the cam looks great, I'm going to look at cam bearings. And I've been rambling long enough, so I'm out. And again, I'll see you on the next video.